Welcome and thank you for waiting. All participants are currently on a listen-only mode for the duration of today's webinar. Today's webinar is being recorded and may be posted publicly. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the session over to your host from the U.S. Census Bureau, Deb. Deb, you may begin.
Great, thank you so much. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar event, Finding Hidden Insights in American Indian and Alaska Native Data on data.census.gov. My name is Deb Rivera, and I will be your host for today's event, where our presenter will explain specialized filter selections, often overlooked data sources, and little-known techniques for accessing American Indian and Alaska Native demographic data and geographies on data.census.gov. Before we get started, I do want to take a moment to thank my Census Bureau colleagues for joining me today and helping to support our speaker. Now, I will turn things over to Tyson here in just a moment, but first I have a few housekeeping items to share with you all. Today, we have a wonderful panel of subject matter experts joining us, and they are here to help answer whatever questions they can throughout the next hour. So as we go through the presentation, we would like to encourage you all to make use of the Q&A panel in WebEx to submit questions that you may have. The question and answer panel is located all the way on the bottom right of your WebEx screen. If you cannot see it, you may need to click on the three dots at the bottom right to pull it up. And then at the end of the webinar, we will go over some of those questions that were submitted through the Q&A panel. A quick note on the final question and answer session, we will focus on the platform data.census.gov. We will not be able to go in depth to address questions on the topic of American Indian and Alaska Native data, the collection process, methodology, or other Census Bureau products. Now, finally, we are recording the webinar today, and all of the materials for this training will also be available through the Census Academy website. So with that, I'd like to welcome you all again. Thank you so much for joining us. And it is now my pleasure to introduce your speaker for today, Tyson Weister. Welcome, Tyson.
Great. Thank you, Deb. And thanks again for taking time this afternoon to spend with us on finding hidden insights in American Indian and Alaska Native data on data.census.gov. My name is Tyson Weister, and I work in the Center for Enterprise Dissemination. So we are the folks responsible for data.census.gov. It's going to be the focus of what we're working on today. And what we have planned are a series of live demonstrations and different tips and tricks and resources sprinkled in throughout the way. So I'm going to be flipping back and forth between some slides here and definitely spending a lot of time on the live site, showing you how to access American Indian and Alaska Native, or AIAN for short, data based on race and geography. And then, of course, we'll wrap up with resources for learning more and then take some of those questions that Deb mentioned. So to get started, for the bulk of the demonstrations today, we're going to be showing different ways to access American Indian and Alaska Native data by race. So with that, there are lots of different ways to think about and categorize different race and ethnicity. So I wanted to go over some core concepts here. The Census Bureau collects race and ethnicity data according to Office of Management and Budget, or OMB standards. And the data that we're looking at today were collected based on the 1997 OMB standards. There are some changes happening to these OMB standards that have not yet been implemented into our data collection, but will be coming soon. But again, today we're looking at data that was collected based on the 1997 standards. A big part of those standards is that OMB defined race and ethnicity as two separate concepts. So 100% of people would report their ethnicity, meaning whether they are Hispanic or Latino origin or not Hispanic or Latino, and then they would report one or more race groups, which is what we're going to be focusing on today. These data are collected and race is categorized based on self-identification. So the Census Bureau does not tell people how to mark race and ethnicity. We rely on the people completing our surveys and census to self-report any race or ethnic groups that they identify with. And I've included a screenshot on the right-hand side. This comes from the American Community Survey and is similar to the same question that was used on the 2020 census. So you can see exactly how we're getting the data. Notice that the question asks what the person's race is, and then the instruction is mark an X for one or more boxes and print origins. You'll notice that the third checkbox says American Indian or Alaska Native. So when a respondent marks that box, we would categorize them in our data as American Indian or Alaska Native. And they also have the opportunity, as you can see below the checkbox, there is a free form write-in or prompt where the respondent can print the name of the enrolled or principal tribes, and it gives some examples. So this is where we get different detailed groups. And a big thing to also keep in mind with race data that we're going to be showcasing as we work through the site and filters is that people can identify with one or more race groups. So when you're thinking about American Indian or Alaska Native, you could think about a situation where someone only checks the third box and does not identify with any additional race groups. Or you could think of situations where a respondent identifies as American Indian or Alaska Native, but then they also check additional boxes. Because again, people are allowed to identify with multiple race groups. So let's see what that looks like on the site. I'm going to start very basic when we start diving into this data, and we're going to layer on additional complexity in terms of different filters, complex data tables, and functionality of the site along the way. But to get us started, we're going to look at what is the estimated number of people in the United States who are American Indian and Alaska Native. And we're going to look at this through the population that is AIAN alone. That would be the most narrow way you could think of American Indian and Alaska Native as a race. And then we'll also look at the numbers for AIAN alone or in combination, which is the broadest or kind of maximum or largest way you can think about American Indian or Alaska Native as a race group. So let's see this on the live site with numbers. I'm going to go to data.census.gov, and anytime you're accessing race and ethnicity data, I personally love to use the filters, which we refer to interchangeably as advanced search. We're going to be using that exclusively today in our demonstration. So once you click advanced search under the single search bar, you'll notice that there on the left-hand side, high-level categories, geographies, topics, surveys, years, and codes. We're going to be working extensively today in the topics filters, specifically the race and ethnicity. So as we click through these different filters, ultimately we're looking for one or more checkboxes as a final search selection. Any words or phrases that you see with arrows that do not have checkboxes means that when you click that word or phrase, you're going to get more detailed options to choose from. So here I just want a filter for American Indian and Alaska Native. I'll go ahead and click the phrase here at the top. And then I start to see more detailed options where I can dive into detailed American Indian or Alaska Native tribes. We'll be doing that later on. But to start high level, what you would want to choose is this American Indian and Alaska Native checkbox. It's the one that doesn't have any additional words and phrases. It's, again, just American Indian and Alaska Native. We'll talk more about the different types of detailed filters and detailed tables that different filters lead to. The other thing I wanted to point out on a high level, notice that as soon as we clicked that checkbox, different words, characters, and phrases are added to the URL. For now, I'm going to go ahead and click search in the lower right and tables at the top. And I'm going to browse through a couple different options here. So there's 283 different table results that are related to this particular filter. As you scroll down, you'll see the first 10 tables at the top. You can page through the different options once you scroll to the bottom. You can also increase the number of tables shown at one time up to 50. And I'm going to click on a couple different options here. So the fifth result, you can see it comes from the American Community Survey. That's a survey conducted each year. B02001 race. And then I'll look at the columns and rows of the table and the table header. This is from the 2023, the most recent vintage. In the column, we haven't specified a geography, so we get data for the overall United States. And then we see a row in this data table for American Indian and Alaska Native alone. So again, this alone means that they only identify as American Indian and Alaska Native. They do not identify with any additional race or ethnic or race groups. So that estimate is 3,341,333 people who identify as American Indian and Alaska Native alone. Now, part B was to look at this for the alone or in any combination, the more broad way to think about American Indian and Alaska Native as a race. You can see just below the race table B02010, American Indian and Alaska Native alone or in combination with one or more races. So this would include people who only identify as American Indian. It would include someone that identifies as American Indian and white, American Indian and Black, etc. And when you think about that population more broadly, you can see that the estimated number of people that would fall into that category goes from 3 million all the way up to 8,851,007. And then just to point out here, not only is the overall American Indian Alaska Native filter helpful for these totals for the overall population, there's also a table or two that provides data for selected tribes. So you can get population totals for some of the larger tribes in Alaska Native villages across the country. If you click on table B02021, you can see the total number of people alone or in combination across these different tribes. So this is definitely a good starting point as far as the filters go, is that American Indian Alaska Native filter to start diving into the tables. Let's talk about some additional functionality and how we can build on this. For this second example, I want to show you how to visualize the data. We have maps and new chart functionality on the site. And for this example, I'm going to map out in chart the percent of the population that identifies as American Indian and Alaska Native alone or in combination. And we're going to show this across each state. And also for this example, I'm going to use the 2020 census demographic profile product. So back here on the live site, we showed you how you could start fresh from the landing page and go to the advanced search. You can also notice on the left-hand side of this spot where we just were, there's a filters button. You can add or remove filters as you work through the site. So here we already have the American Indian Alaska Native filter. I want to add all states and the 2020 census demographic profile product. So on the left-hand side, I'll go ahead and click state. And it is checking all of the geographies to make sure they're compatible with what we've selected. So give it some time to load, and we can see all states is the very first checkbox. And then next, I want to find the specific 2020 census product. So under years, I'll choose 2020. And then we also mentioned earlier that there's a survey section of the filter. Here I'll dive into decennial census. And a really great overview of some popular data with decennial counts and percentages is from the demographic profile product. You don't necessarily have to know these products. I'm just demonstrating this as an additional way to go about searching. And we wanted to map and chart the data, but all of our maps and charts are based on data tables. So let's actually look at this table first and hone in to make sure it has data that we're interested in visualizing. Looking at the columns, we see our geography is each state. It gives us counts and percent. And then this particular table, it's providing data for the total population, but it cuts across different population characteristics. So as you look on the left-hand side, the rows of this table, once you get past sex and age, you'll see race, then total races tallied. We see something for American Indian and Alaska Native alone or in combination with one or more other races. So in the case of Alabama, this means that 2.6% of the population is American Indian and Alaska Native alone or in combination. And as we scroll to the right, we would get these data for each state. So now that we've familiarized ourselves with the table layout, let's go ahead and click here on Maps. What you'll want to do on the left-hand side is make sure you're still clicked in the table that contains the data you want to map. Here I have DP1. Our map is set to the state level. And all we need to do is tell the system out of all of the data values in that table, which one do we want shown on our map. So what you'll do is click the drop down at the top and you'll choose American Indian and Alaska Native alone or in combination. So remember, we had to scroll quite a bit to get to that in the table view. These are ordered in the same way that the data rows in the table were. So here I'll choose American Indian and Alaska Native alone or in combination with one or more races, and we get our visualization. So this shows us that states in darker shades of blue have higher percent of their population who is American Indian and Alaska Native. You can zoom in, you can click individual states and see, for example, in Oklahoma, 16% of the population identifies as American Indian and Alaska Native. So maps are one way for you to visualize the data on our site. Another way is through charts. When you're at the top, there's a More Tools button. If you'd like to save one of these visualizations, our maps are printable. This will actually generate a PDF download that's printer friendly. And what I also wanted to point out here is under More Tools, you'll see Chart. And when you flip between maps and charts using the More Tools button, it's going to save everything you've selected. So this is another way that we can look at the American Indian and Alaska Native alone or in combination population. Notice it's saved our particular variable selection, but if we needed to manually flip between a different variable in the table, that same drop down is at the top of the charts that we saw in the maps. And you can choose to make some edits to how these data are displayed if you want to sort this in ascending or descending order. Just as a quick example, we also have two different types of charts. There's bar chart and column chart. All right, so moving on beyond some of the functionality to visualize the data, I want to drill into the detailed race and ethnicity filters and why you might use one filter versus another. So what I want everyone to leave today is to understand that depending on which race and ethnicity filter you select, one filter will direct you towards what I'm going to call today our standard tables, and another filter will direct you to what I'm going to call iterated tables. So depending on which one you select, you're going to get to two completely different sets of tables. I'm going to go into detail about how you can recognize which filter is going to take you to which type of table. Again, you don't have to memorize all this, but at least leaving with the understanding of filters take you down two separate pathways. So first, we're going to look at standard tables. Any filter you select on data.census.gov. We just had selected in our last example the filter that was American Indian and Alaska Native. If it adds words to the URL, it's going to give you standard tables. Any filter that adds codes, in this example, I've selected American Indian, Alaska Native alone or in combination with one or more races, and it added T equals 009 to the URL. That code 009 is an indication that the filter is going to take you to iterated tables. Beyond paying attention to what's being added to the URL, some other indications of filters that take you to iterated tables are filters that contain the phrase alone, in combination, all available, or any pathways that begin with detailed. Now, why is this important? Your standard tables are going to cover the greatest number of geographies. So standard tables are released more frequently. They go down to the block for the decennial census and block group and census tract geographies from the American Community Survey. Standard tables are released more frequently compared to iterated tables. So for those two reasons, it's always best to use filters that go to standard tables if they will answer your data question. And if you're not sure whether they will or not, I recommend giving them the first look. Iterated tables are the special set of tables that you typically want to go to. Their main benefit is that they provide information for detailed tribes and tribal groupings, especially characteristics. So not just population totals of, for instance, the Navajo Nation, but also what is the income or educational attainment for that particular group. Examples of standard tables, if you're working with the American Community Survey, the products are called data profiles, detailed tables, and subject tables. Decennial census include the demographic and housing characteristics file, the demographic profile we looked at just a moment ago, redistricting data, and summary files 1 and 3 from the historical decennial censuses. Your product will display at the top of your data table. Notice that this screenshot's showing an example from the 2023 ACS 5-year detailed tables. And then when you're looking at the tables, if it's a standard table, you're going to see the population group in one of 3 places. They may appear in the table title itself. Here we're seeing a screenshot of a table title that contains the phrase American Indian and Alaska Native. It's also in the universe statement for this particular table. Or you may see them in the data rows of the table. For instance, this table has a row that says American Indian and Alaska Native alone. We've actually encountered all 3 of these examples up in our previous demonstration. And finally, standard tables sometimes have table IDs that end with a particular character. So C will be the most common one that's applicable to American Indian and Alaska Native. It provides data for the AIAN alone population in both the American Community Survey and decennial census tables. And decennial census also has some tables that end in K, R, Y, or AE. They are more detailed breakouts of the AIAN population based on whether that particular group identifies as not Hispanic or as Hispanic. All right, so let's look at an example using filters that take you to standard tables. We're going to look at the characteristics of the American Indian Alaska Native alone population, specifically answering what is the median income for AIAN households in Alaska, Washington, Oregon, and in California. So going back to the site, anytime you'd like to start fresh on the landing page, click the census logo in the upper left. We're going to be using the filters once again. So I'll click Advanced Search under the single search bar. And under Topics, I'm going to select Race and Ethnicity, American Indian and Alaska Native. And again, I want to go to the standard tables and start high level. So I'm going to choose American Indian and Alaska Native. Notice this adds characters to the URL and their words, American plus Indian and Alaska Native. That means it takes me to standard tables. Then on the left, I'm also going to add my geographies. You'll see state. I'll choose the multiple state checkboxes that I'm interested in. Was Alaska, California, Oregon, and Washington. And then next on the left-hand side, I'll choose the topic. So I don't want all of the tables for AIAN. I just want the income ones. Under topics on the left, I'll click income and poverty, income and earnings, and then choose the checkbox income, households, families, individuals. Then I'll click search in the lower right once you've selected all of the relevant filters and tables at the top. There are 21 income tables for AIAN, and I wanted median income. I can see median is the very second table, B19013. The table ID ends in C. Remember, that's an indication that the tables for the AIAN alone population from standard tables. We also see American Indian and Alaska Native alone in the table title, and it's in the universe statement. So always be mindful about reading all of the qualifying information. Then we get the data. We can see median income for AIAN households is 60,691 in Alaska, 81,901 in California, and then we see Oregon and Washington. And specifically, this is going to be measured based on whoever the primary householder is, and if their race and ethnicity is AIAN alone, they would fall into these categories. All right, so your standard tables are going to be great for, again, overall population totals for American Indian, Alaska Native, and characteristics of AIAN alone. Otherwise, your iterated tables are going to be your go-to for characteristics of the AIAN alone or in combination population, and then especially for detailed tribes and tribal groupings. Examples of iterated tables from the American Community Survey include selected population profiles and tables, and the American Indian and Alaska Native tables. Examples of iterated tables from the decennial census are the detailed demographic and housing characteristics files A and B, summary files 2 and 4 from the historical census, and American Indian and Alaska Native summary files and demographic profiles. Now, we mentioned that for standard tables, your population will appear in the table title, the universe statement, or the rows. For iterated tables, they will appear in the columns of the table. So you would select one or more filters for these population groups, and based on which ones you selected, you'll see additional columns potentially added to these iterated tables that give you the data for each population group you selected. So let's check this out in action. We're going to look at characteristics for detailed AIAN tribes, specifically answering the question of how many housing units are owned by people who are Chickasaw Nation alone or in combination, and how does that compare to the overall AIAN alone or in combination. On the live site, I'll click the census logo in the upper left, start us fresh from the landing page. We're going to use the filters. On the left-hand side, I'm going to choose race and ethnicity under the topics section. Then I'm going to choose American Indian and Alaska Native. So up until this point, we've only been using this general filter to get data from the standard tables. This time I want to dive deeper. And I see there's an option, detailed American Indian and Alaska Native alone or in any combination. I'm going to drill into this to start selecting my groups. Right on this page, I can see the AI/AN alone or in any combination option. I'll go ahead and mark that while I'm here. And then also I can drill in to get data from detailed tribes or tribal groupings. So Chickasaw Nation is within the American Indian category. I'll go ahead and drill into that. Then this gives me all of the detailed tribes to choose from. So when I'm here, I wanted the Chickasaw Nation, and actually I made a mistake earlier. So let me clear out that previous selection and scroll back down. These filters do change or have potentially can change from year to year. So notice here in this panel, what I wanted to point out is there's a Chickasaw Nation and there's a Chickasaw alone. Anytime you're not sure which one of these you should be selecting, you can go ahead and even choose both of them to pull up all of the possible data. And then going back here, now that I've made that selection, I'm going to back out, and I wanted to choose the American Indian and Alaska Native alone or in combination with one or more races. All right, so we have two Chickasaw filters just because we may not know exactly which one we would need, and then we have the overall AI/AN alone or in combination filter. When I selected those filters, notice that each of those added codes to the URL. So 009, 52W, and 7W4. Those are indications that these will take us to iterated tables. Next, I'll go ahead on the left-hand side and choose under topics. I'm going to choose housing. And then I'm going to choose owner, renter, householder characteristics. And then I see owner, renter, tenure. So once I have my filter selected, I have home ownership and then my population groups. I'll go ahead and click search in the lower right and tables at the top. And here I'm going to choose the third table, B25003 tenure. This comes from the American Community Survey, and notice that the product is the 2021 ACS 5-year estimates, American Indian and Alaska Native detailed tables. So this shows us the number of households that are owner occupied versus renter occupied across the two population groups. So we see AI/AN alone or in combination in the first column, and Chickasaw Nation alone or in combination in the second column. So for Chickasaw Nation, we can see there's about 25,000 total households. 15,000 of those are owner occupied and 9,000 are renter occupied. All right, moving back here to the site, what I wanted to also mention, as you start working with iterated tables, they can have complex population thresholds. So as you start adding detailed tribes and population groups, and especially once you start adding geographies beyond the national level, a common question that we see from data users is, why am I getting data not available message, or why do I not see columns for all of my race and ethnic groups? So the reason that you may see these messages on the left, data not available, means that 0 population groups are provided through that particular data table for the geography you selected. Reason you might see columns missing, in this example, I've selected 2 population group filters, AI/AN alone or in combination, and Chickasaw Nation alone or in combination. But once I added California to this data table, it only gave me 1 population group. There's no column in this table for Chickasaw Nation. And the reason that this is occurring is you haven't met the minimum thresholds for this particular table to be available for a combination of geography and population group. So when you see data not available or missing columns in your table. Typically, you want to increase your geography to a higher level geography or go less detailed for your population groups. So when I'm referring to these thresholds, what do I mean? These are just a couple different examples of thresholds. They can be applied in different ways. I'm going to work down this column that says ACS 1-year selected population profiles. So in order for your select population profile to be available, there has to be a total number of at least 500,000 people in the geography you selected. So for instance, California, there's at least 500,000 people living in the state. This 65,000 threshold is for the selected race and ethnic group. So in order for the table to be available, there has to be at least 65,000 people for the population group you selected. So 65,000 or more Chickasaw Nation people, or 65,000 or more AIAN alone or in combination. So that threshold was met for AIAN alone or in combination, but not met for Chickasaw Nation. And then the other possible threshold is unweighted sample cases. So this means that we needed to have received at least 50 responses from the population group within the geography over the course of the survey. So for instance, 50 responses from Chickasaw Nation people during the survey period. These iterated products have complex thresholds. You can learn more about them for the different surveys and programs by visiting the links at the bottom. I provided just a few examples in the slide before, but definitely recommend diving into more detail if you run across error messages and are unsure why. All right, so up until this point, we focused on finding data across different American Indian, Alaska Native race filters. Let's talk about how you can also think about AIAN data in terms of geography. So these are on this map that you're seeing different American Indian reservations, Alaska Native villages. We have tribal statistical areas and state recognized tribal areas shown here. When we conduct different census surveys and programs, the data are tabulated based on geography, and we do provide that information based on American Indian and Alaska Native areas. So not only can you access AIN data based on race, you can also think of this as where people live. So to show an example of this, we're going to look at the percent of people that speak a language other than English in the Navajo Nation Reservation, and also in the Red Lake chapter of the Navajo Nation Reservation, so a smaller area within Navajo Nation. So I'm going to start fresh, click the US Census logo in the upper left, and then go to Advanced Search. And this time we're going to be working with geographies. It gives you some of the more common geography options to choose from. If you want to access the AIAN geographies, be sure to click All Geographies. We have over 240 different levels of geographies to choose from. One of them is called American Indian Area, Alaska Native Area, Hawaiian Homeland. So when you choose this fourth AIAN option that has a simple title, it will take you to the overall reservation and off-reservation trust land geography. We get a detailed list in alphabetical order, so I could scroll to Navajo Nation. There's also a search box here at the top where I could start typing in a keyword, for instance, Navajo, and then you'll just be sure that you check the box in order to make that a final selection. So this is for the Navajo Nation Reservation. And I also wanted to look at language data for the Red Lake chapter. In the Census Bureau, again, clicking under Geographies and All Geographies, the Navajo Nation's chapters are considered a tribal subdivision. So here under American Indian Area, tribal subdivision / remainder. it would prompt me first to select the reservation that I'm interested in. So here I'll go to Navajo Nation Reservation, and then it gives me all of the different chapters to choose from. I'll go ahead and click the box at the top and type in red and choose Red Lake Chapter, Navajo Nation Reservation and Off-Reservation Trust Land. Then finally on the left, just like we've been doing before, I'll choose a topic for language under populations and people, language spoken at home. Then I'll click the search button in the lower right and tables at the top. So rather than seeing data for people's identification based on race and ethnicity, we'll be seeing data based on whether people live on the Navajo Nation Reservation and whether they live in this particular chapter of Navajo Nation. One thing that I want to point out as you look in the columns of your table, notice that this first table has data for the Navajo Nation Reservation, but we don't see our second geography. There's a note here at the top that only data are provided for one-year estimates for certain geographies. So anytime you see a geography missing and there's an option to switch from ACS 1 year to ACS 5 year, you'll want to do that. Now we see the data for Navajo Nation Reservation. And as we scroll to the right, we'll also see the Red Lake chapter data. So we can see in this example, people speak a language other than English, 763 on Red Lake chapter, and 96,195 across the Navajo Nation Reservation. And again, these data represent everyone that lives in the reservation, regardless of their race identification. All right, so going back here to the slides to wrap up and start opening for questions. Another thing that we didn't have time to discuss today in the webinar is business data based on race and ethnicity. So we've been focusing on characteristics of people. If you wanted to know how many businesses were owned by American Indian and Alaska Natives, we do have a program at the Census Bureau that provides that data. It's called the Annual Business Survey, and you can select that filter and see different data for number of businesses owned by American Indian Alaska Natives. Beyond today's session, if you have data questions, we recommend reaching out to us at census.data@census.gov. You can also send feedback to us for how we can make the site easier for you to use. We encourage you to sign up for email updates. You can visit the QR code in the upper right and subscribe to data.census.gov updates. It will bring you to our monthly newsletter where you'll get the latest system enhancements, data releases, and educational opportunities to help you make the most of the site. We also have workshops where what we showed today was live demonstration of a very particular topic on accessing data. These hands-on workshops are more generic in nature, but they also allow for hands-on practice using the site. They're anywhere from 2 to 3 hours in length. So you'll get live demonstration, an individual exercise, time to work through it on your own, and then you'll come together as a group. They are free of charge and we offer them each month. There are different topics: basic, advanced, and mapping on data.census.gov, microdata and API or application programming interface. Those are some of our more complex topics. And we also recently added a geography essentials for beginners webinar workshop. Last thing I also wanted to mention, our area of expertise today is on accessing data, but we did want to make sure that you are aware we have an intergovernmental affairs office for tribal affairs. These three folks that you see on the slide, Dee, Melissa, and Eric, are the folks that manage tribal affairs. So if you're part of a government from a tribal nation, we have staff that are here to help you. So feel free to reach out to them with your questions or any other questions you have beyond the scope of of accessing the data or something that they can point you to the correct direction. And with that, I'll turn it over to Deb.
Great. Thank you so much, Tyson. All right, so in a few moments, we are going to review some of the questions that were submitted through the question and answer panel. But if you still have a question on searching the data.census.gov website for AIAN data, please feel free to submit those now. You still have time. But before we do dive into your questions, I want to let you all know that we have set up a quick evaluation survey, and that's going to pop up when you exit WebEx. So it'll pop up in a brand new browser. When you see that survey window, please take a moment to share your thoughts with us. You can let us know what worked well, what we could be doing better, and especially if there are any other topics that you would be interested in learning about in a future webinar or workshop. So if in case there are any questions remaining after our session concludes today, or simply if you'd prefer to email us your question instead, please feel free to reach out to the email inboxes that are going to show on your screen here in just a moment. If you are a member of the media, please contact the Public Information Office at pio@census.gov. For general data.census.gov questions from the public or training requests, please feel free to reach out to the Center for Enterprise Dissemination, either one of those two email inboxes that you see. And you can also reach out to the Tribal Affairs Office via email at ocia.tao@census.gov. We do look forward to hearing from you all. All right, so now we can go ahead and transition over to the questions that we have received. And Tyson, we did receive a lot of questions, a lot of great questions throughout the webinar. We picked up one that was directly related to the platform data.census.gov. We'll wait to see if any others come in. But the question that we received, if you're ready, reads as follows. So when I look at table B17010C, it's for poverty status in the past 12 months of families for American Indian and Alaska Native alone. For my county, I can see the estimate in letter N by the age group, but not a percent. Is there a way to change my view to percent versus estimate?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So the N means that there weren't enough sample cases or essentially survey responses from the AIAN population for that particular geography. So there's a couple things that you might be able to do to get the data to show. One is to choose a higher level geography. So maybe rather than county, you choose metropolitan statistical area or state. The other option that you could choose, I'm not sure if you were clicked into the American Community Survey 1 year or the ACS 5-year estimates. If you were in the 1 year, you would want to try the ACS 5-year, and that may display the data for you. Because rather than based on the survey responses received over just 1 year period of time, it would be based on the survey responses received over 5 years. And I actually had that show in my final example. So let me go back to the site here. When I first got to this table, it defaulted me to the ACS 1 year estimates. And even for this particular table, it was showing ends. But when I switched to ACS 5-year, the data were able to display for the Navajo Nation Reservation. And then I also got my second geography. So my recommendations would be go from ACS 1 year to 5-year, and then potentially consider, if that doesn't resolve your issue, choosing a geography larger than county, such as state or metro area. And then also I'll add to that the table B17010, tables that start with B will always have totals. You mentioned percent. So you could certainly calculate percentages from the totals that you see from the B table, but any tables, just for your awareness, that begin with S or DP or CP, those contain percentages as well as totals. So just another little tip there for you. If you are looking specifically for percentages, you might want to choose different types of tables.
Great. Thank you so much, Tyson, and thank you for that question. Now, we did receive another one, Tyson, and this question reads, when I click on the United States Census Bureau banner in the upper left corner, I see a different screen. Why would this be?
I'm not sure if you've made it all the way to the data.census.gov website. So I'm just going to go here to census.gov. I'm not sure perhaps if you're somewhere on census.gov and then were to click the US Census logo in the upper left. If it's taking you back to a page that looks like this, is what I suspect could be happening, then you were not on data.census.gov, you were on census.gov. So census.gov has lots of useful information about the different surveys, programs, and is definitely an official site to the Census Bureau. But what we were focusing on today was data.census.gov that has data tables from the most popular surveys and programs at the Census Bureau, including the Decennial Census and American Community Survey. And anytime you click on the census logo somewhere on data.census.gov, you should always be getting back here to the landing page. So if this doesn't answer your question and you have more specifics, feel free to write us in. But I suspect maybe you were on a census.gov webpage at that point in time.
Yep. Thank you so much, Tyson, and thank you for the question. What I was thinking, and if I'll just pop in here really quick, Tyson, I was thinking, you see that banner on the top of the page on data.census.gov, that thin top one that says an official website of the United States government. I'm not sure if maybe that's where they may have clicked in. I know that may have taken somebody to a different page. I'm not sure, but not sure if that might have been it, but wanted to clarify that. Yeah. All right. Great. Thank you so much for that question. And I'm just double checking here to see if there's any other questions that have come in related to the platform that we may read out loud. Tyson, give me just 1 second here. Okay. All right, Tyson. So it looks like those are the questions that we received that were related to searching on the platform data.census.gov. So I want to thank all of you for submitting all the questions that you did. We really appreciate your interest and your engagement. And if you have any questions remaining after we conclude today's session, don't forget that you can always send us an email at census.data@census.gov. I'll make sure to put that email address into the chat. We would love to help answer any questions that you may have. So with that, Tyson, I will turn it back over to you for final thoughts.
Great. Thank you all so much for your questions today and spending the afternoon to learn more about accessing data for AIAN populations. Some additional resources to learn more about data.census.gov are here on our resources page. You can also access this by clicking help under the single search bar on the landing page of data.census.gov. You'll find short video tutorials, our history of recorded webinars, upcoming data releases, answers to your FAQs, and PDFs with step-by-step instructions to help you make the most of this site. Now, if you're part of a national organization and you want training on data.census.gov, we are here to assist you. You can send training requests to sed.cedsci.outreach@census.gov. But we also have data dissemination specialists who are located throughout the country. There is a data dissemination specialist assigned to your state, and they provide training across Census Bureau topics, tools, and data sets as well. They aren't focused just on data.census.gov specifically, they are generalists. So you can reach them at census.askdata@census.gov or 1-844-ASK-DATA. Again, they take training requests, and all of these resources are free for you. So feel free to reach out. We are here to help you access the data you need. They have also hosted this session today, and the centralized training hub for the Census Bureau is another resource accessible to you at census.gov/academy. Once again, thank you all for joining today. We look forward to seeing you again on a future webinar.
That concludes today's session. You may disconnect at this time.